I get asked two questions all the time about my work. I get asked, what do you do? And I get asked, what do you make? Okay, and I say, well, what I make is usually inappropriate comments to people I shouldn't. And what I do is I put up with a lot of crap, and then I treat the sewage. Okay? Anytime we deal with inspections, we can deal with a lot of crap, right? And that's just coming from the people, because they don't know who we are. They don't know why we're there. They don't know why they get directed to us. They just say, well, the city sent me to you. Why do you have to do anything? I've already paid my impact fees. I've already done this, I've already done that. I work for South Valley Water Reclamation Facility in West Jordan, Utah. If you didn't hear my name this morning, it's Spencer Parkinson. I am also the chair this year. But we don't own any, well, I shouldn't say we don't own. We now own 2 sections of collection lines. We own our interceptor lines. But we have districts, we're kind of a special service district that has 5 different entities of collections that discharge to us. So those 5 different entities, one of them does their own pretreatment, and the other 4 come to us and we do their pretreatment for them. So I deal with 3 different mayors, 3 different city councils, 5 different board members, and then we deal with hundreds of businesses. Not quite as many as Denver. Metro, they deal with quite a few more. We're only a 50 MGD plant. We run about 23 million gallons a day right now. We run a fog program by using a surcharge program. And we, as some people in the state of Utah like to say, we permit everybody because it's a nice way to be able to control. It's a nice control mechanism to keep everybody on the same page. We do our best to treat everybody the same. Sometimes some slip through the cracks. But we do different types of inspections too. We go out and we actually, the cities will send us a copy of the business license application. And we do our determination to see if we need to go visit that business or just, we have a classification system. So let me back up. We have a classification system. We classify A's. We have our Class A's, which are our categorical users. We have our Class B's, which are our significant users. We have our C's, which is all our commercials. That includes anybody that's a chemical blender, a silk screener, a printer, anything of that type, car washes, automotive shops, anything that's not quite industrial. And then we have our D's, which is all of our restaurants, all our food service establishments and our schools, hotels, any place that has food service that they provide food to people. And then we have what we call our F's because we forget about them. Or, you can think of another word, but I'm not going to use it. But we don't worry about those. We just stamp them F, we send it back to the city. It's no big deal. Those are like our lawyers' offices, our automotive sales part. They're just doing sales. They're not doing any work on automotives, shoe sales, anything like that. Any generally retail sales, things like that. We don't worry about those. So we just stamp those, send them back to the city. But anybody else, we go and we visit. And because we visit them, we want to know what they're doing. Right? Because we need to make our determination. We don't necessarily send out an initial questionnaire to everybody because that's a whole lot of paperwork and we don't want to have to deal with that. So we do what we call a preliminary inspection form, and that's a 2-sheet form. It has an NCR copy on the back, which means it just carbon copies through, and we leave a copy of that with the industry. Whether we need to do anything with them or not, we leave a copy. So they can go back to the city and they say, well, South Valley's been out. They left us this, we're good to go, can we get our business license? And I go back, I approve their business license, send that back to the city. So I want this to kind of be an informal discussion a little bit, and if need be, we can have somebody run the mic around so we can hear it on the video, which, when we decide the video, I told the board, I'm going to be presenting, and I have a face for radio. This is not going to work out well, but, here I am. So Jake, when you edit this, trim off some of this, give me some muscles or something, Yeah. Yep, have surcharge me. So we deal with 9 SIUs. Okay, that's our categoricals and our significance. We deal with 9 of them. We have galvanizers, we have meat packers, we have dairy product manufacturers, we have paint manufacturers. Who else do we got, Dylan? Brick manufacturer. And what we've done over the years is we have created a relationship with these businesses. Now, does that mean there's other businesses out there that, don't like us? Absolutely. But we've created a relationship with these businesses, and it makes our inspections easier. We also go out and we inspect twice a year versus once. So we're in front of them at least twice a year. And we sample 4 times a year. Because we figured by the time we were going to sample 2 times a year, and then the industry would have to sample once a year, because we wanted to make sure we were following up on everything. My predecessor was just like, you know what, let's just do 4 times a year. We'll do it quarterly. And we do all the sampling. We don't require the businesses to do any sampling unless they want to. If they do any sampling, they have to send it to us, send the results to us. We service, we permit right now about 550 businesses. It's a lot of permits to write, but most of them are general permits, so it's not too bad. We have a template, we stick things in, we spit them out, send them off. We also have, my assistant is a notary, and so we have the businesses come in and we have them sign their permit. And we do that for 2 reasons. One, so we can put a face to a name, so we know who we're dealing with, and the other is we take that opportunity to educate them. So when we do come out to inspect them, they know we're coming, they know why we're coming. Hopefully they pass it down to the line staff that's working there, because they're not there, they're out making more money. But we do everybody. We do heavy industry, light industry, we do a lot of restaurants, automotive repair, car washes. We sample all of them. We pull about 1,500 samples a year, I think, between 6 of us. 3 of us pulled the majority of those samples. Okay, we've got it set up in the system so it works like that. But we still have to go out and inspect them. And what I want to talk about today is 2 things. I want to talk about keeping your eyes open, because when you're out doing an inspection, you're going to see things that you can report to other departments. Because even though it's not underneath your purview, you can still go back, report it to the health department, report it to stormwater, report it to CID, whoever you need to, right? And we're going to talk about what to do when you're denied an inspection. When they flat out just say, no, you're not coming in here, I don't know who you are, I don't know why you're here, you're not signing this form, you're not getting in. We're going to talk about some steps to mitigate that so that you don't have to escalate. Okay? Does anybody in here inspect home businesses? Just out of curiosity? You do? Okay. Oh, okay. Perfect. So in the state of Utah, one of the things that we're facing right now is they had a congressman, congresswoman that had a friend who was running a home business, got shut down by the health department because they were providing food at like the fair or something. So they bring food, but they weren't going through any of the health department standards. They were just bringing it and selling it, and the health department kept shutting them down. So they went to their friend who's on the Utah State Congress and said, hey, would you propose a bill so I can make food at home and do this? So that brings a couple, I made my comments, pushed back against it with the Utah State Health Board of Health, and they apparently didn't listen or didn't pass it on to the Congress, because it got passed this year. So now we have people that are making home businesses that can create quite a bit of food, cater out of their homes, whatever else they want to do, take it to the fair, take it to the farmer's market and sell it. And my concern, because I am not allowing, nor am I going to change our rules and regs so that my staff goes into someone's home just because they have a home business, is how many SSOs are we going to have in our service area, because these people don't have grease abatement devices on their homes, but they're going to increase the amount of food that they're creating at their home, which is going to impact the downstream use of their, of their subdivision or whatnot. And we have, Pete, is he still in here? He stepped out. Okay, so years ago, Cedar City had a food truck that was coming, parking at the house, and then he would use the clean out at the house to discharge his waste off his truck and end up plugging the subdivision a couple times, if I remember right. So it's things like that that I want to have everybody kind of keeping in the front of their mind and thinking about while they're out doing inspections. So which businesses does everybody here inspect? Who inspects restaurants? Okay, what do you look for? You just inspecting the interceptor? Perfect. So he said we're looking for floor screens, we're looking for following the BMP, different things like that. How about the rest of you? Just inspecting the interceptor and make sure it's being properly cleaned and maintained? Records? Okay. Awesome. Okay. Everybody in here should be doing their SIUs, right? If they have them. If not, I won't tell the state. How about your car washes or your automotive shops? Okay, Dean does, South Valley does. So years ago, we have Jiffy Lubes, and Jiffy Lubes are, they like a clean shop. So they go around and they mop up the floor. They get any oil on the floor, they mop up the floor. They mop up the floor downstairs in the pit. And so they claimed, so we had a new one come in, they wanted to build a new one, and my predecessor says, you know what, just humor me here. Install an oil water separator. We want to kind of do a pilot project on it. So that's been, what, DeLon, 20 years ago, 25 years ago? Okay. Installed one, and then they hated us after that because we made them install one on every other one, because our local limit for oil and grease petroleum is 100 milligrams per liter. They were running about 12 to 1,500 milligrams per liter all the time. Because what was happening was they would mop up their floor, and they'd have their emulsifier and their soaps and everything in their mop bucket, but they would never change out their water. And so by the time they actually dumped the mop bucket at the end of the night, there was nothing but pure oil in that mop bucket. And so by the time that interceptor got filled and they were cleaning it once a year, it was violating our local limits all the time. So that's why we started doing automotive shops. Car washes aren't quite as big a deal, but sometimes, because not so much anymore with the newer ones that are all tunnel, but with the self-serves, we found people that you walk up on them and they're pulling the oil plug on their truck, sitting in the car wash, because they wanted to change their oil. Okay, granted he was a 20-year-old kid, had no idea, but this is what people think, right? We've watched people take and pull engines up in the back of their trucks and just start pressure washing them off, engines that they pulled out of cars recently, just because they clean them out. Central Valley has a video of a carpet cleaner that jumped out of his truck in the tunnel wash, got the automatic wash, jumped out through the valve to empty his tank on his carpet cleaner truck, jumped back in and let it clean his truck while draining out. These are all things that, you're thinking, well, it's carpet cleaning waste. I have had so many car wash owners call me up just belly aching because the muck and the fibers in the carpet get stuck to the interceptor sidewalls and they stink to high heaven when they open them. And then people won't come use their car washes. So just think about who you inspect and why you inspect them. Okay? When are you inspecting them? Just annually? Once a permit cycle? Before they open? 5 years from now because you haven't checked back in with them? Okay, we have a wig tape facility that we knew was there. We've known it was there for years. We didn't really think anything of it. They decided they were going to build a new building. So we went out to see what they were doing. We thought maybe they're manufacturing tape after all. No, they were just cutting it into strips so you could put your toupees and your wigs on and everything. Keep them on your head. What we were unaware of was they had a 25,000-gallon tank of acetone sitting there. Now, granted, they didn't have any drains. We asked them, DeLon goes, well, what do you do when it spills? What happens if you puncture it with a forklift or whatever? And they go, oh, we just leave the building for the day and let it evaporate off. Okay, so it wasn't going to the storm drain. But out in that same area, DeLon and I were driving around, and if you don't know DeLon, he was the one that was yeehawing this morning. Great guy, he'll open any beer you need. But we were driving around, going to check somebody else and see water running out of a building. Okay, so we stop, we pull in there, we're like, go in, it's a granite cutting shop. They're cutting granite countertops. And we're like, hey, what's going on? The gentleman on the forklift's like, oh, our pump went out. Sorry about that. This has never happened before. Never. So much never that when I went back, pulled up the address on Google Maps, it had a permanent stain on the asphalt. Okay, so we informed the city's stormwater. They went out, took care of them. We informed the health department. We always do a prior to them opening inspection because we want to know what they have. Because just because they put this on the questionnaire doesn't mean that they shouldn't have added all this. You know, many people are very forthcoming. Other people are like, I don't want my trade secrets out there. That's the word I love the most, is trade secrets. And we'll get to one of those. But it's interesting to me the things that people conveniently forget to mention. You know, what chemicals they forget to mention. But build a relationship with your industries. I got a email this morning from a gentleman who just runs an automotive shop. And he emails me and he says, can I put this blue DEF, which is for diesel emissions, he goes, it's waste. He goes, can I just dump it down the drain? I said, he goes, it's just this and this. So it's part water and it's part, I don't even remember what the air chemical is off the top of my head. And I says, you know, let me do some research. I look it up, and on the SDS sheet it says mix with solid waste, like kitty litter or something, and throw it in the landfill. So I sent that back to him and goes, oh, great, thanks. That's all I need to know. Okay, but if you have a good relationship with your industries, they're willing to allow you in. They're willing to tell you everything. Maybe not everything. They're still trade secrets. I don't need to know how much fruit goes in a cup of yogurt, right? But make sure that you're following up with businesses. Businesses are changing all the time. They're adding new things all the time. You could go out, and I've seen this business 5 years ago, and you're going out just doing a door-to-door, just checking on everybody, and all of a sudden they've added a new line or a new product that you weren't aware of. And all of a sudden that throws them into a different category. Whether you need to know where they're hauling their hazardous waste to, whether they need an oil water separator, whatever it is. So make sure you're following up with them. How many of us inspected during COVID? Okay, a few of us. Did anybody do electronic inspections? You FaceTime them? Okay. And that's great. But when the FaceTime camera's facing out this way and you're asking them a question, you can't hear them go, it's kind of hard to see their facial expressions, but it's a way to do it, right? I ended up putting my staff out for 5 weeks because a lot of our inspections are restaurants. And so all the restaurants in Utah got shut down. They're like, hey, the state's closing. So I sent my staff home. They got paid. I went to the office. I got a lot of work done. There's nobody there to bother me. But when we came back and the restaurants started opening up, I didn't want my staff in the kitchens. We still did our SIU inspections. We still did some of our business license inspections, but we didn't have to do everything, right? We slimmed it down a little bit to make sure everybody felt comfortable and everybody felt safe. Because as it was, most of the restaurants had limited staff anyway, because many of their staff went home and didn't come back. And I know in Utah, everywhere there's a help wanted sign. So we're still facing that to some extent. But this year, I told them, wear your masks, go back into the businesses, you'll be okay, everything will be fine. Wash your hands, you filthy animals. But everybody's been fine so far in my department. So we didn't do any digital inspections. We only have 9 SIUs, so we did those inspections. We went face to face. They wore masks, but all of our industries were more than willing to allow us in. It wasn't a really big deal. Some of them, the food manufacturers, were a little bit more leery than some of the metal finishers and whatnot. But because we had a good relationship with them, we were there. We did our business and we got out. It wasn't really a big thing. We kind of talked about that. This is the problem when you remember at 9 o'clock at night on Sunday night and you got to drive on Monday that you have another presentation to finish after you've tried to put the conference together. It's terrible. Okay, so what are we looking for? Anything out of the ordinary. This business here told us we're just a soda shop. We said, that's great, put it in an interceptor. But we're just a soda shop. So we gave them a little bit of time. Well then, One of my inspectors lives right by this, and he went by because the line was horrendous. It was around the parking lot and through and everything, and they were frying beignets, which is their little trademark thing. But because they didn't have a fire hood, which the city told them they had to have, they moved their fire outside. And you can see all the staining on the ground on how well they contained everything, right? This is kind of some of the things we want you looking for, because while it's not underneath your purview, they were trying to find a workaround, but yet when the rainwater hits that, because I guarantee they didn't clean it up, where's it going? Storm drains. And in Utah, storm drains go right to the river. You know, they're starting to put in the big underground tanks to contain stormwater now. But many of our storm drains go right to the Jordan River in West Jordan. Anybody found somebody like this yet? We had another one, an older employee that was out driving around. I think they were heading to another inspection and seen a bucket overturned on a storm drain right in the middle of a parking lot. The oil can, the grease can, and everything was maybe another 100 feet on, but whomever was walking it from the restaurant out there got tired and decided, hey, we can just dump it right here, and left it to drain so they could take the bucket back inside clean, and the boss wouldn't yell at them. Okay, but that went right to the storm drain. But these types of things, we can call up the health department, we can call up stormwater, we can get them to get somebody out there to clean it and charge it back to the business. Okay. We've already kind of talked about the granite cutting shop. We run into that quite frequently because people think it's just water. It's just got, it's got some rock in it. It's not like it's the same water that's going down over the mountains because it's taking a little bit of sediment with it. No big deal. And they're probably right. How many of us inspect granite shops? Okay. And what do we find there, Jack? What should be there? Okay, and most of the ones in my area have actually a kind of like a car wash pit in them where they've got the pipe in the center, so the water level is supposed to just come up and go over the pipe, but it allows all the soils and everything to settle out. And then occasionally they will pump the water out, and then they'll get in there with a shovel, just scoop it into 5-gallon buckets and throw the 5-gallon buckets away. But when it's pumping out and flowing out, then that tells me that pipe is plugged because the pump is only recycling water back to the saw. So if it's running out, you already got an issue in the sewer because it's plugged. Okay? So be aware of that. Like Chip and Meg were talking about, we have a couple of silk screeners. We've got 3 silk screeners and we've got 1 printer. And the printer is an interesting individual because try as they might, they still lose a lot of ink. To the point that when our lab did their 624, 625 samples, it stained their glassware to where we had to charge that glassware back to that printer for the simple fact that we couldn't reuse it again. And if you go to silk screeners, we had one come in last week actually. Says, I've been in business since 1975. Why are you permitting me now? We're like, welcome to the club. Think of all the years you got away with it. Because if you look on the cleaner that is for silk screeners, it says do not discharge to the drain. But none of them realize that because all they do is they spray some of that on, they scrub it with a brush or they take a pressure washer to it, and they spray all the ink off their screens. Now we do have 2 silk screeners that are a little bit larger. They've done a fabulous job. They have a silk screening machine that they stick their screens in, goes through high pressure, and it has a filter on the end, a bag filter that collects the solids, allows the water to run out. Works fantastic. They've never had a TSS, so I've had the surcharge, but their BOD is still through the roof. It's in the thousands, anywhere from about 2,000 to 5,000. But again, if you have the inspection, if you have that relationship with your businesses, they'll call you up and they'll say, hey, My BOD numbers just went through the roof. We had one that they do silkscreen, they do lanyards. In fact, the lanyards you have on today, we got from them. But they also do they do hand sanitizer, chapstick, and lotion in little bottles. They're little promotional things. With the introduction of COVID, they ramped up the amount of alcohol they were using. And all of a sudden, their BOD went through the roof, and she calls me up, and I was like, well, what changed? She goes, well, we haven't done any more silk screening. I was like, did you do any more hand sanitizer? She goes, oh, enough said, thanks. Paid the bill, we moved on. Okay, and the bill was a couple $1,000s. It was like $4,000 or $5,000. And they were used to about $1,800 in bills. But knowing your businesses and having that relationship helps. We had a gentleman, I use that term loosely, probably one of the sketchiest inspections we've ever gone on. He's sitting there with 4 or 5 of his cronies, and we walk in, we're like, we took a representative from Central Valley because they had a similar business in their area that was claiming they were getting gold from salt, from the Great Salt Lake. They were going to refine it out and everything. So he wanted to go see because the business in our area was set up. We went out there. They were kind of sketchy. They were asking lots of questions. Why you here? Why that? Why this? Why that? And DeLon, who's an inspector for South Valley Water, had gone out there initially when they applied for a business license. And he's like, I don't know about this, but I don't know enough about chemistry to say. They had lots of tanks of acids and other chemicals running around and this, that, and the other. We got in there. We kind of seen what we wanted to. There was hoses laying everywhere. It was a great production for a movie. This same gentleman is now, him and his 2 partners are now under FBI indictment for a Ponzi scheme. Took a bunch of people for about $7 million. And then left the property owner with all the chemicals to clean up. It cost him about $25,000 to get rid of all of his chemicals because they left all the acids and everything for him. He was very perturbed when he called me. He said, this is my first commercial property, and this happens to me. I was like, well, I'm sorry. How can we help? So we talked through it, and I helped him get rid of his chemicals. Not down the drain, by the way. But watch yourselves, too. We've had a couple places where the city has informed us, they're no longer with us, they've been shut, that they were fronts. They were money laundering fronts for the Mexican mafia. So I said, hey guys, you want a bulletproof vest before you go in here? Scott keeps asking for one, But the funny thing was, the one business would start at like midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they'd go across the street to Smith's, buy all this beer, so that all these people that were drunk leaving the bars had someplace to go to continue drinking all night. And then they charged them a fee to get in and continue drinking all night. And then they laundered money through that system. So be aware of where you're going. Pictures. Your pictures were great, guys. If you're going to take pictures on an inspection, you need to be aware of a couple things. Number one, it should be in your rules and regs or your city ordinance that you can take pictures on an inspection. Because if it's not, and you take those pictures, you use those pictures somewhere, and your industry finds out and they get their butt hurt about it, or they think you stole trade secrets or whatever else, you could get sued and you could get your department sued. The other thing to watch out for is on federal installations and different things like that, ask them to take the pictures because they'll frame it. Just say, I need to see this spill right here. I don't need to see all this. I don't need to see the bombs or anything. I need to see this right here. And many times they'll allow you to do that. Other times they're just adamant. You're not taking pictures. We did a tour for the pretreatment group in Utah, and we walked into an industry and they were flat out, you will leave your phones in your trucks, or you leave them right here at the front desk. You're not allowed to take your phones in, which was fine. They weren't my industry, and so I didn't care. But the other thing too is be a little courteous about it and allow them to look through your pictures before you take them back and use them. If there's one that they're like, yeah, can we go back and take that one again and reframe it? that's fine, but make them explain why, right? Because if they're just saying, well, it had my wrong side or whatever, no, you know. But if there's something that maybe they don't want out available for anybody, like any of their competitors to see or whatnot, that's okay, right? Because where courtesy is given, courtesy is offered. If you're denied an inspection, first thing you need to ask yourself is why. Okay, what's going on? And the thing I tell my staff all the time is go out and grab a sample. I don't care if we wanted a composite sample or whatnot, you go out, you take a sample immediately. So we carry extra bottles on our truck, so we grab the whole boat of samples that we normally take, just so we can see what's going on there. Drive around the perimeter, okay? Don't go trying to peek over the fence, but it's called over the fence. If you can look through, they have a chain link fence or whatnot. It's open to you. It's open to anybody. You can go look at it. You can say, hey, from the street, I saw this. Which is how we got onto a business that was dumping. They had a milk truck go bad or had a leak on it or something, and they backed up to their stormwater retention pond and let it go. And the granite shop across the street, who hates that industry, called and sent us pictures. So don't hesitate to take into account people calling you and saying, hey, something's going on out here. We had another industry years ago who fired an employee who thought he was a very stellar employee, asked for a raise. They're like, no, he fought back with them, they fired him. He called up and talked to my predecessor and says, are you aware that at 2 a.m, they're out there dumping hazardous waste down the drain because of the barrel reclaim shop? We were like, no, we weren't aware of that at all. So at 2 a.m, they went out there one night and found them dumping. They had a big open pit that went right into the sewer, and they were dumping 55-gallon barrels of hazardous waste down the drain. That gentleman went on to serve 8 years in Utah State Penitentiary, thanks to CID and all the work that was done there. And I believe he is also the first and only person that EPA CID has ever had to shoot down in Florida, because he left the state and went down to Florida and they went to go get him. So that's our notoriety. We've got the only person shot by EPA CID. But over the fence discovery does not mean grab the drone out of your truck, send it up, fly it over the business and see what you can see. Okay, that kind of breaches that secondary law of where you need to get a warrant. Okay, but seeing it over the fence, you can say, hey, I see somebody out there dumping some barrels that's going in the storm drain. We were at a training and I was presenting there, and about half an hour before I went on and presented, my staff sent me a picture of a funnel sticking in a drain out back of a muffler shop. And I was like, that's intriguing. Well, we followed up with it. Turns out it's a vault. It doesn't go anywhere, but they take their oil out there and they dump it into the vault, and then a couple times a year they have the vault pumped out, which is going to be fine until that vault leaks, right? Then I may or may not know if it leaks. But it's okay to drive around. It's okay to take a sample immediately. Don't get your hackles up because they say you're not coming in my business. Okay? And don't get upset. I get calls. DeLon Scott, you want to stand up? This is Guido and Goomba, you know. These two guys are big. I send them out. They do inspections. Oh, you're not even going to stand up for me. They're intimidating, right? I get calls all the time. You send out these two big goons, you know, to intimidate my employees. I was like, no. I sent out two of my inspectors to go and get some information from your employee. If he is intimidated, that's on him. I was like, did they say anything untoward? Well, no, they just asked him to sit down so they could talk about it. Well, then what's the problem? Right? Use some humor to kind of diffuse situations. We get calls all the time because people will allow us entrance, and they're an employee, and then the boss comes back and is all bent out of shape because, well, my employee shouldn't have let him in. Well, then tell your employee, don't tell me. Because we're just out there doing our job. This is what we're looking for. If we find it, this is what we're going to do. And if we have any issues, we'll let you know. I walked up to a lady one time in a restaurant. She was the manager. They pointed me to her, and I says, ma'am, are you the manager? She goes, yes. Are we in trouble? I says, not yet, but you could be. Here's what I need. And she kind of laughed. Okay? But we inspect all sorts of things. We inspect our interceptor installations. We have been threatened to be thrown in the hole and buried. We've had papers ripped out of our hands. We've had hard hats thrown at us. I've been called everything but a white man. Which that is more descriptive, right? I mean, come on. But you got to have a little bit thicker skin, but you got to understand where they're coming from too. They're a little bit upset. Because as the regulator, we hold their business license hostage. Or we hold their business hostage because we're not allowing them to move forward. Or we're costing them money because we're requiring them to put in some pretreatment devices. And on bigger businesses, they're like, oh yeah, no problem. No big deal. I'll spend the money. Okay, we had, we'll talk more about this on Thursday when I present again. We had a business, we had a $1.5 million fine levied against them. Yeah. It was for multiple pH excursions and a couple other things. They wanted to be able to expand their production. My predecessor says, no, your treatment system is not sized for more production. We're not allowing it, we're not approving it. They pushed back and forth. They brought lawyers in. My predecessor wouldn't talk to lawyers. He was like, you bring lawyers, I'm done talking. There's nothing that the lawyer can tell me that's not in my regs. They kept trying to force federal regulation down our throat, the lawyers did, but our rules and regs superseded that and were a little bit different. So the back and forth went on for a while until they got fed up, and all of a sudden plans started showing up on his desk for a new treatment plant. Now, was it exactly the treatment plant we wanted? No. But in the end, well, now that they've expanded it even more, they've spent $15 million to be able to treat waste and increase production, mainly because we put in an SNC from the inspections that we'd done previously. Forced them to have a black eye so that their stocks went down. So all of a sudden, they're like, all right, let's play ball. We ended up with $52,000 and a $15 million treatment plant out there now. Okay? So don't get all upset when you get denied, because it might be a third party. We had a business that hired a third-party security company. Said, you will sign this form before you enter the facility. Well, that form is great, except it says you can't, it's a non-disclosure agreement. And it also asks, are you with, Tajikistan, Pakistan, anything with Stan on the end of it, any nation with Stan on the end of it. And my inspector said, I'm not signing it. I can't sign it. I will sign a blank form, but I cannot sign this form. Do not, make sure you read any forms before you sign them in an industry, because it could be considered a non-disclosure agreement, which means that anything you find is now undiscoverable in court and unusable in court because you can't talk about it. Or they'll sue you as an individual. When you're doing your inspections, if you carry a little notebook and you're writing down all sorts of things in your little notebook just to help you remember when you get back to the shop so that you can write up your report, that's great. But understand that that notebook can be subpoenaed in court. And anything you put in that notebook can be used against you in court. There was a case years ago when I was in a training where a gentleman had wrote, this guy is just such a frickin' jerk. That's the nice version. They got his notebook, it was subpoenaed. That was brought out in court, showed that this inspector had an issue with the individual already, and that case was thrown out. Because it showed a predilection to having issues with the person he was dealing with. So be aware that anything you write down, if they see it, if whoever you go on your inspection with sees that you have that notebook, they'll say, hey, Spencer had that notebook. I want to see what's in that notebook. Okay? So be aware of that. In this case, the inspector left. He goes, all right, fine. Don't threaten them with law enforcement, going and getting a subpoena, going and getting a warrant. Nothing. Why? We know our authority. We leave. We put steps in motion, right? So my inspector left. He calls our contact at the industry and he says, hey, this is what's going on. They're not letting me in. The inspector, our contact goes, don't you have a delivery to make? Those are made around back. He goes, what are you talking about? He goes, don't you have a delivery to make? Those are made around back. Finally clicked. He goes, oh. So he goes around to the side, says, yeah, I got delivery. Opened the gate up, didn't make him sign in, nothing. He drove around back, parked, did his inspection for an hour and walked out, drove back out. And that's what we did for the next 3 years because that third party security guard would not allow him in unless he signed that NDA. So find a workaround. Having knowledge, having that relationship with your industry will help you out time and time again. They're there to do a job just like you are. There's no reason to kick down the door, come in, beating your chest, throwing your regulations in their face, because they have the same regulations. It's just like when we deal with hospitals. The hospital goes, you are the least of my concern. I have the FDA because of the food. I have this because of all the RCRA, because of all the hazardous waste. I have this because of this. I have this. We are like low on the level. And those are a political monster to try to contend with and deal with. And when you sample them, you really don't find nothing anyway, because they're taking care of everything because of all those other organizations that are a little bit bigger than us. Okay? If you have to, get a warrant. I'm glad some of you laughed. It means I'm not that old. Go get a warrant. If you're with a city, go to the city attorney. If you're with a district, go to your district attorney. Let them do the paperwork to get you a warrant. You're not a police officer. You can't go file for a warrant. But when that warrant comes, make sure you're there with the police officer. Don't waste anybody's time, because you need to be there when the police officer issues the warrant to the business and says they have a warrant to search this facility. Okay? And sometimes that's a political quagmire too. Ain't that right, Jim? Yeah. Logan City had to do it a few years back, and it was quite a long procedure. But they got in. So, if you find anything that is illicit, anything that is criminal, anything you think is criminal that maybe is above your pay lane to deal with, call CID. Okay? Many of the local police officers don't know environmental regulations. They don't know what is right, what's wrong. They don't know the Clean Water Act. We're lucky in Salt Lake County in Utah that we have, we did have an environmental crimes task force, which involves stormwater from all the different cities, wastewater collections, all the different environmental regulatory agencies. So we could bounce things off each other and we could help each other. And we had an investigator with the district attorney's office that knew environmental crimes pretty well, worked closely with the health department, so he knew the Clean Water Act. And so he was able to come in and he would call whomever he needed to call and say, all right, this is what I'm facing. What are the regulations on it? But CID can do that for you too. But when CID comes in the door, they're going to say, give me your files. Ladies and gentlemen, those are your files. You do not give them up. They can have copies of everything because they're CID, but those are your files. Because how are you going to ensure that you have those files when you have to go to court later on if CID is taking them for a criminal investigative case? So provide copies, but do not allow them to take your originals. And they might push back. They'll say, do you know who we are? Yeah. Would you like copies? Okay? Because you need to have your copies, you need to have your originals so that you can maintain your chain of custody on all your materials and everything else. Okay? And I just said that. Are there any questions?